Okay, is this recording? Yes, it's automatically recording. Let me share screen. Thank you. Where am I? Okay, I hope this continues. So very good. We're done with this part. Actually, this is the part that usually causes the most confusion. And all the pictures here just emphasizes on what I said. Okay, fine. If you want to have a look at it, you have it all in your notes. The CO2 is coming from the respiring tissues. It reacts with water to give me carbonic acid that will dissociate into hydrogen ions and hydrogen carbonate ions. Hydrogen ions binds with the hemoglobin to give me hemoglobinic acid, and the hydrogen carbonate ions moves outside, and the chloride moves in, and this is the chloride shift. Okay, here. This is the chloride shift. Easy? Good? Fine. And yes, remember, this happens at the respiring tissues, and in the opposite direction happens at the lungs. Okay, I don't want to waste any more time on that. Here we're talking about the carbon dioxide, and it binds with the amine group in the hemoglobin. So every hemoglobin also binds with 4. Remember the number 4. Okay, now I want to jump. We said all this, so I'm not going to waste any time on this graph because this graph is very important. Now, again, understanding always makes life easy. This is called the oxygen dissociation curve. What do we have on the x-axis? The partial pressure of oxygen. In other words, the concentration of oxygen. And what do we have on the y-axis? The hemoglobin of the affinity of hemoglobin, percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. In other words, the affinity. Okay, now I like to make my own drawings. Or let's use this. Fine, now this graph looks like an S, like this. And you read the graph in so many different ways, either from left to right, or from right to left, or you can just break it into half, whatever. We will discuss all ways. If we will study the graph, or we will read the graph from left to right, then we are reading what is happening to the affinity of hemoglobin as there is an increase in the partial pressure. Okay, now you tell me, when the partial pressure of oxygen increases, what happens to the affinity? Hemoglobin has an increased affinity or a decreased affinity? Increased. It will pick up oxygen. This is called oxygen loading. So when we are reading the graph from left to right, we are reading how well the hemoglobin is loading oxygen. Okay, I'm picking up oxygen. Now, at the beginning, we see that in all cases, as the partial pressure of oxygen is increasing, there is an increase in affinity. But what do we see at the beginning? Is the rate fast or slow? Slow. So there is an increase in the affinity of hemoglobin to oxygen, or in other words, the hemoglobin is picking up oxygen, but slowly. Yes, the rate is slow. Now, the question is, why is it slow at the beginning? Who will tell me? Yes, you are right, Hedy, for 2 reasons. Number one, there is already a low partial pressure of oxygen. So the hemoglobin already has low affinity. The hemoglobin is not very fond with the oxygen. This is one reason. And there's another very important reason. What is it? Exactly. Hemoglobin finds it very difficult to pick up the first oxygen molecule. Remember that? So I am the hemoglobin, and we have only one oxygen. I'm not very fond of this oxygen. My affinity to the oxygen is already very low. I prefer the hydrogen ions because the hydrogen ions, I have more affinity to the hydrogen ions. Okay? So here at this part, I am at the respiring tissues. I have low oxygen and I have high CO2. High CO2 means dissociation with water and giving me more hydrogen ions. So the hemoglobin here has 2 options. It will bind with the low level of oxygen or the high level of hydrogen ions. The high level. So like Hedy said, there is little oxygen anyway. Number 2, the hemoglobin will bind very, very slowly to the oxygen because binding to the first oxygen molecule is very difficult. After it binds with the first oxygen molecule, what do you see here in this part of the graph? That the rate increases, that a small increase in the partial pressure of oxygen, this is always how we describe this middle part. A small increase in the partial pressure of oxygen results in a great increase in the percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. Here, it's very steep. Here, the rate is very fast. Now, why? Yes, they can bind more easily. We can see that. You're describing the graph. Now explain the graph. Why does it bind more easily with the oxygen now? Exactly. Exactly. Because we said that the hemoglobin finds it very difficult to bind with the first oxygen molecule. But after this happens, after successfully the first oxygen molecule binds with the hemoglobin will undergo some structural changes known as the conformational changes. And then after the conformational change is happening or happened, picking up of the oxygen will be very easy. And here we'll be at a stage called the cooperative binding. Okay, so here the hemoglobin is very fond with the oxygen, picking up, picking up, picking up, picking up. This is the called cooperative binding because the conformational change has already happened, making it easy for the hemoglobin to pick up oxygen. And because I need this oxygen because I'll give it to the respiring tissues. Okay, now we're done. Very good with the first two parts of the graph. And then we have the last part, this part here. Here is at the lungs. Why did I say it's at the lungs? Because I have already very high partial pressure of oxygen, and the high partial pressure of oxygen is always found at the lungs. I can see that the hemoglobin is picking up the oxygen also, but slowly. It is very reluctant. Why? Exactly, because the hemoglobin is saturated with oxygen anyway. There are no